If you are an audio podcaster and thinking, hey, you know what? I should try this YouTube thing. It's all the rage. Well, I did it for the Christine Show via their new cool RSS integration. And I'm going to tell you what happened on this episode.
Sound matters. Be heard. Welcome to the podcast where you get exclusive behind-the-scenes tips to make your own show sound truly spectacular. This is Podtastic Audio.
Hey, what's happening? How are you doing today? I want to say thank you so much for being here. I am Chris, and I am from the original Chris and Christine Show podcast. You know what? You can find out every single thing you want to know about that show on a little website, which I built at chrisandchristineshow.com. You know, if you can't remember that, there is a link to it, in the show notes of this very episode. In fact, all the episodes have it, but this one, since you're listening to this one right now, if you scroll on down, there it is. So happy podcasting. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Hope your podcast is doing wonders for you and that you're having an amazing time creating your podcast. So today on this episode, we're going to talk about the biggest elephant in the room when it comes to podcasting, and that is video podcasting. And more specifically, I'm talking about YouTube, the great, wonderful YouTube universe. Now, speaking of YouTube, it makes you wonder if YouTube has now become like the main, biggest video platform of all video platforms. I'm talking trumping over, regular television, regular broadcast television, maybe even movies. I bet more people watch YouTube, like hours of YouTube, than they do watching movies or television. I wonder if that stat is out there. Listen, I don't have time today to look it up, but it makes you wonder that, and I know a lot of people do watch YouTube. I think it's like got to be millions, if not billions, of hours of YouTube watched every single day, maybe even every minute of the day. YouTube has so many great, wonderful things. And I think now that the big major networks do know that a lot of eyeballs are on the YouTube platform watching things. They have all moved all of their shows, all of their news segments, all the most important stuff. They put it on YouTube for free, which I think is amazing because you don't have to stay up late to watch the news or Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, whoever late night talk show you're into. They have those on YouTube for free. We all can consume that stuff. And I think it's wonderful because a lot of things like movie trailers are on YouTube, or video game stuff's on YouTube, or content creators, lots of content creators are on YouTube. YouTube is a wonderful place for a visual platform. But what do you do if you run an audio-only podcast like I am doing right now with this show and also the Chris and Christine Show? Both shows are audio-only podcasts. Well, they are. The creation of the show is audio only, and the production of the show and the actual distribution of the show is audio only, although we do incorporate some video elements from time to time, like our vacation videos and things like that. But I wouldn't consider that like part of the podcast ecosystem. It's us going on vacation. Check out a video I made of that trip. Here it is. But it's not like we're physically doing the podcast in front of video cameras. Not yet. And I did buy a new camera system to hopefully, maybe, not saying we're going to do this anytime soon, but maybe sometime I am getting set up for an actual video recording if we want to go down that path. Now, when it comes to video podcasting and audio podcasting, I like to make sure the audio for this audio podcast sounds very good. It sounds the best I possibly can for the situation I am in with this physical space I am living in. We're actually recording in right now. This space is not designed for audio at all. I'm talking, tile floors, small room. There's some stuff in here to absorb sound, but it's not designed to be like a sound booth. It's not designed for an optimal sound. There's a slight reverb sound to this room, and I've been okay with that. I make it sound the best I possibly can. So if I were going to add video into our show elements, I want the video to look just as good as the audio sounds. I want the video to be great and fantastic. So to make that happen, I bought myself a Elgato face cam, and I got some new lighting and some new tripods and things like that. So I'm going to try to experiment the best I can to make sure if I do video, it also looks phenomenal. So when I do a video style, quote unquote, video podcast, I want to make sure the audio looks great. I want to make sure the video looks just equally as great. You don't want to have like horrible audio and great camera work and your camera looks amazing, your video looks great, or just the opposite where you have like great audio, but your camera looks like it's in a dark cave or something. You can't really, it's all pixelated, maybe it's all grainy and it looks horrible. I want both to look just equally as great. So in the early days of the Chris and Christine show, I'm talking 2019 when we first launched the podcast, I knew even back then that we should probably somehow, even if it's just audio only, we should somehow put our show on YouTube because YouTube is a great, wonderful, massive platform with lots of eyeballs or earballs on the thing consuming content every single day. Because I consumed a lot of YouTube content back then. Probably consumed more back then than I do now. Well, maybe about the same. But the point is this, is that I knew back then that YouTube was a place you probably should have your podcast at. And when it came to podcasting, at least for me in the early days, I really only saw podcasting as just another extension of radio. Like, because the shows I listened to were, replays of the radio broadcasts that were on regular radio. They would do a podcast version of their morning show. That would be the podcast that I would listen to. The only kinds of podcasts that I would listen to would be radio replay broadcasts. So I thought, well, podcasting, it's got to be like radio. It's got to be audio only. It didn't even occur to me to do a video style of a show. I didn't even think about doing video back then when we started because I just assumed that podcasting was only audio. It was an audio format. Listen, you can do your show however you want to do it. You want to do video? Great. You want to do audio only? Great. You want to do both? Go right ahead. It's your show. Do whatever you want. So what I'm saying is that when we first started the Chris and Christine show, because I knew about YouTube, I've used YouTube before. I've made content for YouTube. I was a YouTuber, so to speak. Not really, but I put videos on YouTube. So I was quite aware of how that process worked. And I'm like, somehow we got to take our little podcast and put it onto YouTube. Now, how are we going to do that? So back then, I had to figure out how to take an audio podcast, put it on something that's a visual platform like YouTube. How do I do that? So I took my Movie Maker on my old Windows computer. It was a Movie Maker app or program, whatever it is. It's a very basic and very simple like movie creating platform, which I've used before to create lots of videos for YouTube before. It's very simple. It's very no frills. It's a very simple program. I don't even know if you still have it. Listen, I got a Mac. I don't know. I used iMovie when I make stuff like this. But anyways, so what I did was I took a still image of our show artwork and put it on there and put the actual like episode, like MP3 file, dumped it in there too, and there was a mode on there where I actually had to like stretch out the entire like image to play like nonstop all the way through the entire file so that way the actual show would play and the image, the artwork image for the episode would stay constant on the screen the entire thing. So it would just be the still image. It'd be on there. Great. Done. Once I created that, I would have to save that thing, which took a while to render because my computer was old. It took forever to do these kind of things. I would save that file and then I would upload that to YouTube. And that still took a while to upload that to YouTube. We're talking like maybe half a day's worth of work just to do this extra step to put it on YouTube just to get maybe 5, maybe 6, maybe 10 plays if we were lucky. And I was like, after like doing that for the first, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 episodes or so, I was like, man, this is too much work. I'm already creating the podcast. I'm already recording the show and editing the show and doing all that stuff for the show. Now I have to do this all over again for the YouTube version. And I figure we're only getting a couple plays on there. So I'm like, why would I bother doing that in the first place? So I just basically said, screw this. I'm not going to bother, wasting all this extra time for something that's going to get a small return on my investment. So I pretty much cashed out and said, I'm not doing the YouTube thing for the podcast side. I'm going to keep the YouTube channel up there for vacation videos and actual video videos because those seem to get more traction than actual like still image videos. Well, fast forward us to 2024 And now YouTube is saying, hey, audio podcasters out there, hey, come on over. We are going to hook you up via your own RSS feed. Send that thing over to us and we will create podcast videos for your audio-only podcast. And you only have to do it one time. And guess what? It's free because YouTube is free. So I have done this very same thing for the Chris and Christine show, and I just today did it for Podtastic Audio as for a funsy experiment to see what happens. Now, when I did it for the Chris and Christine show, remember we were doing podcast videos before for the podcast, and I stopped those a long time ago. And now I did it for the Chris and Christine show audio podcast, sent over the RSS feed. And I'm going to tell you how it all went down and what the results have been for our audio podcast, because you're thinking like, is the juice worth the squeeze if you're going to put your show onto YouTube, just an audio only podcast? But before we even do any of that stuff, you are going to need to know how to physically make it happen. So it basically requires you to have a Gmail account. Anybody with a Gmail account already has a YouTube channel. Now, one thing about YouTube you really have to understand is that at the core of YouTube, it is a social media platform. The cost for entry is a Gmail account, a Google account. Once you have one of those, you are officially a member of the YouTube club, which means you can create your own videos, your own content, and you can also comment on other content creators' videos. Now, before we go any further, this RSS ingestion feed that YouTube has presented to audio podcasters is not really designed if you already have a YouTube like video style of a show. If your podcast is a video show and record everything via video and it's already on there, yes, you could do this RSS ingestion. You could do that, but I don't know if it's going to benefit you or not because your show already has your video content already there on your YouTube channel. It's mainly designed for people that do not really have a YouTube presence that are an audio-only podcast. Okay, you're thinking, yes, Chris, I got the YouTube channel up. I see it. Looks great. I don't have nothing on here because nothing's really on here. So what do I do? Where do I start? So here's what you got to do. On everybody's YouTube channel page, there's this little create button you click on there. It's like it says create. And basically, once you has a little drop-down menu below the create, and then you click on new podcast. It says right on there, new podcast. Once you click on that, then you'll see something that says submit RSS feed. Now, if you do not know where to find your RSS feed, you need to go to your podcast media host and look for it. It should be somewhere fairly easy to find. It says RSS feed or something along those lines. Once you find that, you want to copy that entire feed link, copy the whole thing. So when you get to the page that says submit RSS feed, now this is the part where YouTube makes you read and acknowledge all their guidelines and rules, terms of service stuff. Basically, you got to scroll down to the bottom, hit accept that you've read the RSS ingestion tool terms of service. So follow the instructions and click the word next at the very bottom. It's very simple. This is the section where you actually physically enter in your RSS feed, the thing you copied earlier. You just copy and paste and put it right in the box there. Now, it's going to ask you, YouTube's going to say, hey, we're going to send an email to the email that RSS feed is associated with. When you set up your account with your RSS feed, with your media host, whether it's Libsyn, whether it's whoever you use, doesn't matter. Your official podcast email, the email should be within the RSS feed. So YouTube's going to know that immediately. They're going to ask you that we're going to send a verification email to the email that's embedded within the RSS feed. Basically saying, we're going to make sure that you can prove that RSS feed belongs to you, because you can take an RSS feed from anybody. It's pretty much readily available. You take somebody else's RSS feed, you drop it into YouTube. Now, how's YouTube going to know whether or not that's your show or somebody else's show? Can you imagine if all of a sudden you found like the most popular podcast on earth, whatever it is, and he copied that your RSS feed You dropped it in this YouTube thing and you claimed it as yours. And then all of a sudden you got all these millions of views on your channel all of a sudden. That's highway robbery. That's fraud. That's all a number of things. You see, YouTube puts these little stoppers in place just so they can verify that it really is you. So once you get the email, it's going to tell you a code. It's like a 5-digit code. You basically copy that code and you repaste it back into the section where it has you verify the actual email with the RSS code. Once you verify that and you are good to go, it's going to ask you, it's basically going to say, this is your show. Yes, I got it. That's the show. Sounds great. Now, how do you want to upload these? Do you want to upload all the episodes? Do you want to upload only the existing ones that have been published out of a specific date, a date that you choose? Maybe you want to only do future episodes. So like say from this point forward, these are the episodes I want to put on to my YouTube channel. Now, there's other things in this little menu here talking about how to monetize your show. Basically, that if you have paid promotions or sponsorships or things like that, make sure you check the little box for them. Or you can say like there's a box that says, most of the episodes from this RSS feed contain paid promotion. You want to make sure you mark that down because YouTube, basically what they are is like a big advertising company. So they want to make sure that if there's any advertising being thrown around in your podcast, they want to make sure that they get a chunk of that or basically wipe it out and use their own advertisers because they want to make money off you being on YouTube in the first place. You got to think about it. If YouTube is ingesting your podcast for free, they're not charging you to do this at all. Just like any other YouTuber out there, you don't pay YouTube to be there. And the reason why is because they know they're going to run ads against your content and they're going to make all kinds of money running it against your content. So there's a couple things you really got to be aware of if you decide to do this process for your audio podcast. And that is if you're using dynamic inserted content into your show. I'm talking dynamic inserted ads, dynamic inserted intros, dynamic inserted anything you want. YouTube removes those things. So I'm assuming since I don't have any dynamic inserted anything in any of my shows, I'm just assuming that what it does is that it just leaves a blank space or perhaps maybe just a weird gap of some sort in the actual audio file. So it sounds kind of weird. That's the only thing I can think of that would do that. Now, if you have ads that are already embedded into your show, like are permanently locked into your MP3 file, those will always be there. So anything I recorded onto the audio track is going to be into the RSS feed distribution. It's going to be on YouTube. Now, YouTube, let me tell you, they are really, really good about figuring out what is content that you don't really own or should have the license to, meaning more like music. If you're using music into your audio-only podcast where you're not really too sure who really owns the music, you're not too sure whether it's royalty-free or not, don't you worry. YouTube will let you know because they will ding you if you are. But just like anything, there is a learning curve to getting this thing up and rolling and getting it figured out, making sure which videos are quote unquote YouTube safe or which audio podcasts are YouTube safe, things of that sort. There's a lot of like checks and balances that you have to do to perform on your YouTube channel when you're setting this kind of thing up. And what I have noticed, because when you do upload everything like we've uploaded everything, is that everything gets like dumped in there at one time. And I'm not too sure if whether or not YouTube is just streaming the files to YouTube. I don't think they are. I think they might be physically like making new versions of these files on their YouTube server for your YouTube channel. That's probably why it takes so long, because when I did it for the Chris and Christine show, it took a couple of days to upload all, what we have, 180 something tracks. I don't know, something like that. Maybe 180, 170 tracks. And that's why it took so long for all of them to come over there. But when they did, it seems like they all kind of like dumped in like 2 days span. They all dumped all of them together. Now, YouTube does not seem to care whether or not they are in any particular order. Even though we title them episode 1, 2, 3, 4, we go on a numerical order. YouTube doesn't seem to care because they just dump it all in there in random whateverness. So I've noticed a lot of our episodes were just kind of thrown in there in this big data dump. It just dumped it all in there. They're all just a mishmash of shows and episodes and all that great, wonderful stuff, all within the channel, all assuming they were all dumped in there all in the same day. So when you look at the actual date of the video, because most videos, I think all YouTube videos have release dates next to the view count. There's like release date on there too. So it said, oh, they were all dumped in on the 12th. Like this video is for the 12th, even though physically we recorded it 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Now, this is where having individual episode artwork comes in handy. If you are not creating episode artwork for your podcast, for your audio podcast, you need to start doing that like yesterday. Because platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, a lot of them, if not all of them, will actually physically show your own individual episode artwork for each episode. When you press play on it, you will see the actual artwork for the episode. If you decide to not create any individual episode artwork and you decide to dump all of your episodes over to YouTube via this new RSS funsy toy, all of a sudden, your YouTube channel is going to look exactly the same with all of the episodes. I mean, talking every single one is physically going to look the same because they are carrying the basic generic show artwork is going to be shown for each single episode. A big wall of episodes that all look identical to each other. So how is that going to get anybody to push play on anything if they don't know which one to pick because they all look the same? And yes, I do know that they do have the same titles that you do for your actual podcast. Those same titles are going to be in the YouTube channel. So each episode, each YouTube video, I guess, quote unquote video, is going to have the same episode title and description. All that stuff's still there. That's great. But you know, and I know that YouTube is a visual platform. And if you know anything about being a YouTube creator, the actual physical thumbnail of the video is extremely important. It's very, very important. It's probably more important to make sure that looks amazing versus the actual content itself, because that is the gatekeeper that's going to keep the potential viewer to that video to watching your video. Is basically the thumbnail. How amazing does it look? Does it look enticing enough? That's why so many YouTube creators spend so much time and so much energy on making sure that the show thumbnails, episode thumbnails, look so great, look so amazing. So if you already had those done for your audio podcast, the YouTube RSS integration is going to bring all those over already. So whatever episode artwork you had for that particular episode, it's also going to be on YouTube and show it on YouTube as its own unique thing. It's its own unique video separate from the rest, because you were clever enough to make episode artwork that basically kind of described what was in the episode in the artwork. Maybe it's a visual graphic. Maybe it's a picture of your guest. Maybe it's something about what you talked about visually. I'm talking visually in the show artwork. That way on YouTube, which is a visual platform, they see it and they're like, oh, that looks like something that I want to watch or, listen to. So we come to the big moment. You're probably thinking, Chris, what did this actually do for your podcast? How does this relate to your podcast viewership or listenership, or however you want to look at it? What did it do? Did it do anything? What does it do?
Check this out.
Well, let me tell you, I'm looking at a graph because YouTube's got all kinds of graphs and data. It's you almost need a degree to figure out all of their graphs and data analytics they have in front of you. If I did find one, I'm looking at it right now, and this is where a video podcast would actually come in handy, but I'm going to do my best I can with just an audio format here. So if I scroll back to the very last date they have, I'm on a chart that shows viewership based on months. Now, it looks like it goes back to September of 2019. Looks like we're ranging somewhere around, 110 views, somewhere around there. Then it drops down to 0. Then it bumps up to about 50, drops down to 0, bumps up to about 100, somewhere around December. Looks like around summer of 2022, we bump back up to about 300 or so views. Then it drops back down, around the 100 or less viewership. I'm talking like for the month total, not per video, per the month. And then sometime around, May or maybe summer of last year, we bump up to 50 views. Now, this is for the month, by the way. And then when we get to February, the month we're in right now, which is only a few days into the month, we are at over 800. That is over 800 views and counting. In fact, I was looking at the lifetime chart and think last I checked, we are pushing somewhere around 3,600 views on our YouTube channel, which basically is an audio only podcast on YouTube, which we hardly ever pushed anything out to YouTube. We didn't really promote anything on YouTube. We never really thought of ourselves as a YouTube first platform. YouTube was so far down the line. It was like the afterthought of places to actually promote our podcast. We decided to throw everything on there. And since we threw everything on there via their RSS integration, it took it all up. And I think possibly because there was so many videos or audio podcasts that became videos that got dumped into the channel at the same time, like a big, massive dump that put so many videos on our channel all at once. YouTube probably pushed it out, along with other things to viewers and listeners out there. So it got pushed out. I think because there was so much being dumped out all at once, pushed out all at the same time, is that YouTube decided to say, hey, there's lots of these channels, lots of these videos getting pushed out all at the same time. Let's kind of show these out to more people. That's probably why we're getting this big spike of listenership on our YouTube channel. Okay, just for funsies, I just clicked on the last 7 days. What do those data really show us? The last 7 days on our YouTube podcast, YouTube channel, which we never really promote at all, just got 128 views within the last 7 days. Now, I know these numbers are pathetic. They're really not much of anything when it comes to the YouTube giants that push out, each video gets thousands, and I mean tens of thousands of views per video in the first 5 minutes it gets released. Yes, I know that. But for somebody that never, ever really promoted on YouTube and used YouTube as something just to put stuff on, never cared about, never used it correctly as a actual platform, that I think this is a really solid move if you want to put your podcast onto YouTube and you don't have it there already. Now, one cool, amazing thing I forgot to mention is that basically once you set this up, it's already set up the way it is and you never have to change it. Just like when you put your podcast onto your RSS media host feed, it automatically goes to say Spotify and all the great, wonderful places automatically. Well, this is one of those places it's automatically going to go to moving forward. So our most recent episode we did, it gets sent over there and it looks great. And when it comes to looking great, obviously it keeps the original artwork and all that stuff and the audio sounds great. Great. The show notes. What about the show notes? How do the show notes physically look? Well, I'm speaking just for us so far. With this RSS integration, they look amazing. And when I mean they look amazing, I mean everything is in order. All of the links look great. They work just fine. In fact, some of the links, if I was looking at one of them, actually have icons, like a Facebook link. There's an icon for the little Facebook icon next to it. I thought, I don't know, that's kind of weird. I noticed that. So it all looks very smooth and easy to read. It's not all garbled together. Because I do know that some of the podcast player apps, when you put your show notes in there, they aren't really set up to look great for your notes. So your notes will look all garbled together and everything is a big mishmash of stuff. I think Spotify does that. Shout out to Spotify. What's up with that? But I don't know. Anyways, on YouTube, everything looks fantastic. It looks great. Everything's spaced apart correctly. The characters look great. Everything looks fine. The show notes look fantastic. So I suggest doing this if you want to, up your game or maybe get your show out to audiences that have never heard of you before. I'm sure we're getting brand new people listening to our podcast that have never even heard of our show before, just because we're on YouTube and just because I did this. Now, I would suggest you trying this out too. If you have a Gmail account and you have a YouTube channel that you're not really even using for much of anything, really, it doesn't cost you anything to do this. Just be aware that if you do decide to do this, try to maybe start changing your artwork for each episode. Make each episode artwork look different than the next. make it look enticing based solely on your episode artwork. Are you going to want to push play on that episode? No descriptions, no words, no text, just based on the artwork that you create. Now think of all the different things you can create for episode artwork. That episode artwork will stay with you to your YouTube channel. And that is going to be the thing that's going to get people to push play or not push play. But like I said before, if you are already on YouTube and you already have a visual podcast, a visual thing, if your visual show is already going over to YouTube so we all can watch it, then don't even worry about this stuff. This is only for those exclusive audio-only podcasters that are thinking about maybe getting onto YouTube but don't even know how. Hey, thank you once again for listening to this episode today. You know what every single podcaster really needs, other than a microphone, of course? Yeah, it's probably a website. My website is podtasticaudio.com. Very simple. Go ahead and check that out. I got all kinds of past episodes over there, information, a way to contact me, and I will catch you on the next episode.